Hello, good evening, everybody. We're online, bang on time. Always a win, always a win. Glad you could all join us this evening. What we're going to do is try and dig into chapter 18 a little bit more and hopefully give it a little bit more justice than it had last time. I'm just bringing up the chat groups, trying to bring up the chat groups anyway. Yeah, so I will touch on the first part of the chapter, this chapter, or touch on as many things that Spirit leads, so to speak. I've got reams of notes, and it's crazy. You just end up bouncing from one thing to another. But yeah, and Tracy's appeared there. Am I in YouTube yet? I don't know. Let me have a look. Let me say something about this. Yes, apparently so. Let me have a look. Oh, turn the noise off. There we go. So I'm going to be dealing with chapter 18. What I will do is read through the chapter itself, just so we know what we're looking at. And for those that haven't had a chance to read it, be able to pick up the points. Now, what I'm going to do, reading it first. I was going to start and then read, but I don't want to break it up for that. So, Jesus betrayed, chapter 18. After Jesus had said these things, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden, and his disciples went into it. Judas, who also betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas took a company of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees and came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, went out and said to them, "Who is it that you're seeking?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they answered. "I am he," Jesus told them. Judas, who betrayed him, was also standing with them. When Jesus told them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, "Who is it that you're seeking?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. "I've told you I am he. And so, if you're looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the words that he had said, "I have not lost one of those you have given me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. At that, Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father's given me?" Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus, tied him up. First, they led him to Annas, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be better for one man to die for the people. Simon Peter was following Jesus, as was another disciple. That disciple was an acquaintance of the high priest, so he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter remained standing out by the door. So the other disciple, the one known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the girl who was the doorkeeper, and brought Peter in. When the servant girl who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" "I am not," he said. Now the servants and the officials had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. They were standing there warming themselves, and Peter was standing with them, warming himself. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. "I have spoken openly to the world," Jesus answered him. "I have always taught in the synagogue and in the temple, were all the Jews gathered, and I haven't spoken anything in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who heard what I told them. Look, they know what I said." When he had said these things, one of the officials standing by slapped Jesus, saying, "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" Jesus challenged him, "If I have spoken wrongly, give evidence about the wrong, but if rightly, why do you hit me?" Then Annas sent Jesus bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They said to him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They did not want to enter the headquarters themselves, otherwise they would be defiled, unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." And Pilate told them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." "It's not legal for us to put anyone to death," the Jews declared. They said this so that Jesus' words might be fulfilled, indicating what kind of death he was going to die. Then Pilate went back into the headquarters, summoned Jesus, and said to him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you asking this me on your own, or have others told you about me?" "I'm not a Jew, am I?" Pilate replied. "Your own nation and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" "My kingdom is not of this world," he said. "If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." "You are a king then?" Pilate asked. "You say that I am a king," Jesus replied. "I was born for this, and I have come into the world for this, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." "What is truth?" said Pilate. I'm going to leave it there, I think, because afterwards Pilate just offers them the choice between Jesus and Barabbas. Right, just say hello to a few people. Jenny, hi. Hope you're all okay. Kirsty, hi Kirsty. And Tracy's manning YouTube as well. Amazing. Saves me a job. So when I've been looking at this passage, I've been looking at it 3 different points of view. On the human side of me, even from a little kid watching Robert Powell play Jesus of Nazareth, and every year it came on, every year I was disappointed he never got off. He never got, an innocent plea. It made me angry that, everything that was done roughshod. But as I've been reading through this, looking at this from every different angle, we look at Jesus's, the verse 4. This would be the title, if there was going to be a title to this evening. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out. We look at it as though things shouldn't have happened. And if we were looking at it on a human front, if it was, say, Peter or another civilian, so to speak, then it wouldn't have happened. The outroar would be the same that people have now with regards to the trial of Jesus. There's a paper written in 1912 about solicitors and barristers, and they took it apart page by page, the account and what happened to Jesus. And I just read through the law that was supposed to be applied, that these so-called men of God were supposed to uphold and adhere to. So in arresting someone, unless that person was taken in the actual commission of a crime, No person could be arrested without a formal accusation. The Sanhedrin, the supreme court of the Jews, had a place of meeting which was not in the palace of the high priest. When a capital trial sat, there needed to be 21 members of the Sanhedrin sat to give ear to the witnesses and come up with the decisions. The high priest would reside over the proceedings. They would not be involved. They'd be like the Speaker of the House. They would be looking at keeping everybody in control. The accused was presumed innocent until guilt was proven. They could not be judged in absence. They could not be condemned in absence. No judicial procedure could take place on a feast day. Capital trial cases must be begun and only held during daylight. The accused could not be called on to testify, nor make themselves a witness against themselves. And when it comes to the verdict, a person could not be found guilty on the word of a single person. There needs to be two people or more whose story agree with each other. Regarding the verdict itself, the decision of the 21 members of the jury, so to speak, were taken starting with the youngest person first, with the most senior last. That way, the youngest person could give his honest opinion rather than being feeling coerced into doing exactly what the older people had said. A not guilty decision would be delivered straight away, so the person could walk away from court. However, if they were guilty and it was a capital offence, the statement of that guilt had to be kept to the following day. So when we look at those laws they were supposed to adhere to and compare it to what Jesus actually went through on a human level, totally wrong, totally against everything that should have happened. As a human being, I get angry about it, but that's my point of view. What we've got to take into account is Jesus's point of view. But despite this, we've got to remember, in this situation, Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, expected this to happen, was waiting for it to happen. They really had it in for Jesus. Annas, why he was taken to Annas, nobody knows, because Annas had been high priest, but because of his dodgy dealings and the way he riled the people up against the Romans, he was deposed. His sons were deposed, and Caiaphas, as son-in-law, was deemed to be a non-blood relative, and as such would be able to sit. But it's quite obvious that people still regarded Annas as the high priest. Annas had made a lot of money. He brought into the temple the money changers, the sellers of the spotless lambs and things like that. And when Jesus went in there and cleared the place, Jesus put a shot across his bowels, warning them what's going to happen to them. They'd seen Herod deal with John the Baptist, who every time Herod appeared, John the Baptist would shout there like that bloke that used to be on the news for Brexit. He would shout out decrying his relationship with his brother's wife. So that ended up in John's death. Maybe they were inspired by that to do it. But it was a worldly power that thought it was in control of this situation. But what they were about to find out, that the opposite was true. Arrested in the garden in the dead of night, no formal charges given. We would know if there was because John had written it down. In this passage, in the whole chapter, in the whole Bible, God shines through. His power shines through. It talks about a company of troops. Now, a Roman company was anything between 40 and 200. So, anywhere between 40 and 200 troops turned up along with Judas, the temple representatives, the temple guards protecting the temple representatives to arrest Jesus. They turn up in the dead of the night, and verse 4 we read, Jesus, knowing everything that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it that you want? In verse 5 they say, Jesus of Nazareth. They reply, I am he, Jesus said. And the traitor Judas was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and they fell to the floor. All these powerful men had climbed the ravine, thinking they were in control. This was going to be a nice, easy job. Little did they realize who they were going to be facing. In their mind, he's just a scruffy little preacher with a few misfit followers. The troops stationed by Rome in Judea were veterans. That means every one of them had done 20 years going shield to shield with enemies. So they thought this was just going to be a march in, grab and march out job. And while they had faced their enemy face to face, literally the width of a shield against the width of a shield, they'd never before come face to face with the living God before. I am he said. They all hit the floor. Roman, Jew, traitor. When faced with I am, none could stand in his presence. I am the same I am who Pharaoh to tell. And Moses said, but what if he asks who sent me? Said, tell them I am sent you. Our God speaks and the universe is created. Our God speaks and light is generated, darkness is generated, night and day. Our God speaks and the earth is populated with animals. Our God speaks and Adam, man, is born. Our God speaks and man bows before him. When God spoke in this garden, they all fell flat on their faces in the presence of the living God. And the Bible tells us that come the last days and when he returns, that every knee will bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord. Could you imagine being a member of this elite fighting troop that for 20 plus years you've gone from country to country, hammering the locals, adopting their gods into your pantheon so you don't upset any of them, but having never really met God, had any significant presence of God? After all, they were just little idols that they carried around. But in this garden, Jesus says, I am, and God's power flowed a lot of them. I often wonder, thinking about it, what sort of a change it made to them when they look back at having seen this guy they've arrested, they've marched him off, they've nailed him to a cross, they've mocked him, they've beaten him, they've thrashed him. And this guy has taken it without a word. How did that change their hearts? When they look back on it, thinking, well, I had a hand in this. This guy really wasn't guilty. Did it affect them in any way? We know it affected Judas because basically he gets guilty. He goes back, tries to give the money back to the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, and they just laugh in his face. It's just an amazing thought. And again, Jesus identifies himself again, this time He's just confirming his own plan by getting them to identify, it's me. Take me, but don't bother with these. He's fulfilling his own words when he said, I have not lost one that you gave me. And then good old Peter steps in, Saint Foot in mouth. He's seeing his Lord. He's seeing his best mate of the last 3 years, his reason for living, being arrested. And he doesn't know why they're being arrested. So Peter, being Peter, whips out this little sword and takes a swing and manages to cut off Malchus's ear. He was a lucky bloke. He was a lucky bloke because if you can imagine, these professional soldiers that normally their rule of thumb was beat them first, ask them questions second. Realistically speaking, he's lucky to be alive. They could have killed him. They could have jumped up and down on him and dragged him off to torture him. But because of the power of God, we know from other accounts that Jesus heals Malchus and then allows himself to be led away. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out. He allowed himself to be taken to the high priest. He knew the high priest and what they were going to do was illegal. It didn't stop him having a dig at Annas when Annas is questioning him about his followers and what he's taught. And he turns to him and says, why are you asking me? I taught openly. Go and ask them, which is what was required in the law. And the guy stood at the side of him, thinks he's being a bit snarky, gives him a slap. But Jesus challenges him then as well. Both of them, knowing they're in the wrong, palm him off then onto Caiaphas. Caiaphas takes him through a judgment in the morning. No two stories are the same. He gets that frustrated. He jumps off his chair, should have stayed where he was, storms into Jesus, gets up into his face and says, I adjure you in the name of the living God. Are you the Christ? Jesus, knowing everything that was going to happen to him, says, it is as you say. He whips around. Do we need to hear any more? Rips his clothes, and Jesus is then taken off to Pilate. There was nothing normal about what happened to Jesus. Jesus knew it. And Jesus wasn't bothered about it because he knew what was coming. He knew he had to go through it. When Peter chops Malchus's ear off, he reprimands him for it. He says, am I not to take the cup that the Father has got for me? That cup, the curse, he's talking about the cross. He's willingly accepting on himself the guilt, the sin, the curse that sits on my life, on our lives. We should be condemned. We should be distraught in the knowledge. Well, not in the knowledge, because this is the issue. People haven't got the knowledge because the devil's been so clever. He just makes everybody okay as long as you're a good person. But the reality is, come the day of judgment, if you've not got Jesus as your Lord and Saviour, then Jesus says that you're going to spend an eternity away from him, away from God. Imagine being in the most loving environment and you just want to put your feet down, sit down, put your feet up and never ever leave. That's the presence of God. And as Christians, having accepted Jesus as Lord and Saviour, we've got an eternity of that to come. Imagine, as Jesus describes, that hell, his words, hell, is a place of weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Sounds horrific, but they're all the sounds, the actions of somebody in regret. Could you imagine having the gift of life held out to you and you've gone, nah, and walked away from it? And that come the point of judgment, that is going to go around and around and around and around for eternity. You had it, it was there, you walked away from it. That is the regret, the weeping, wailing, the gnash of teeth, a spending in eternity crying out to a God for a second chance that you're never ever going to get. Have you ever done something stupid? I remember doing daft things as a kid, and as adults. And there's moments when I sit there and I think about them sometimes. My brain does a flip and I think, oh, I wish I'd never done that. But imagine gambling your eternity on a decision. We have got an amazing gift available. I don't know if you're listening now or if you're listening later on, but let me ask the question, have you accepted Jesus as Lord? Have you accepted his amazing gift? The crucifixion was a culmination of God's plan to give you the opportunity not to spend an eternity lost and separated from him. If you've not made that decision, seriously, talk to him. Ask him into your life. It's not a decision to take lightly, and it's not something glib that I'm talking about. I'm talking about talking to the creator of heaven and earth, the lamb that was slain, the God, the living God, who wants to have a personal relationship with you. When we look at this passage, Jesus is investigated by the Jewish religious leaders. He's investigated by the Roman leaders. And in both situations, he is innocent and they've had to fabricate something. What Jesus went through mirrors what the lamb goes through before sacrifice, the sin offering. You would take a lamb, spotless lamb, to the high priest. The high priest wouldn't look at you, nothing about you they were interested in. All they were interested in was looking at the lamb, checking the lamb for scars and blemishes, for a perfect sacrifice. Finding no fault, they then sacrifice it. All your sin having been put onto the lamb pays the price, is your what's the word I'm looking for? Is your proxy. Jesus was our proxy. He stood before the high priest, was found innocent, and was executed as the once and for all living sacrifice. That is a God that loves you so much that he gave his only son, so you and I can have an eternity in his presence, not outside of it. It's a free gift for you to take, but you have to take it. There's no point in saying on your deathbed, well, it's all right because I know I've got that free gift I can pick up any second now. But then your heart stops and you haven't had the chance to pick it up. You need to do it now. And I would encourage anybody to do it. It's the best decision I ever made 40 plus years ago. Is it 40 plus? Yeah, 40 plus. Best decision I've ever had to make. I encourage you to make that decision as well. I've gone over time, I think. Oh, just on 8:30 now. I've got about a third of the way where I wanted to. I haven't even talked about Peter or his denial. But I think David might pick that up next week. unless he wants me to carry on and finish it off. But come and join us on the Zoom meeting. I can see David's put the invite into the chat. It is just a chat. It is a time we spend afterwards discussing things, discussing anything we want to share. And if we've got anything we want praying for, we can bring that up as well. I hope what I've shared this evening has been useful. It's always blesses me preparing for this. I hope it's blessed you. Let us know in the chat afterwards. Message us directly. We're all on Facebook. We're all part of the group. You can get in touch with us that way. And come and join us on the Zoom meeting. That'll be kicking off in the next few seconds. God bless everybody. We'll speak to you soon.